we talked about how these companies are disrupted by this new technology. Where do they come from? Where does this technology and nascent ideas come from that disrupt? We know we need to watch out for our products, and we need to figure out how we can obsolete our own. But where do these ideas and nascent opportunities come from? Well, before there was Kraft macaroni and cheese, there was just James Kraft. He and his brothers had moved down from a dairy farm in Canada to the suburbs of Chicago in 1903. And they'd known about cheese, and when they got down there, they decided to start up a business. It was a cheese distribution business. And the idea was they'd take their cart to the wheeled cheese distributor, and they'd buy a huge wheel of cheese and load it onto their cart, and take the horse by the reins, and they'd walk around the city. Good day, Mr. Michelson. Can I interest you in some rich, creamy cheddar cheese? A quarter wheel or maybe a half wheel? And this is what they do. They just go around and they'd sell cheese. And it was a good business. But Kraft slowly realized that in the summer, he was selling a lot less cheese. See, the problem was if he was to sell Mr. Michelson a half a wheel of cheese in the summer, it would go bad before he could sell it. And that's when Kraft started to think, what would happen if he created a cheese that didn't go bad? If he had a cheese that didn't go bad in the summer, he would totally disrupt the cheese market. And he realized what he needed to do was figure out how to make cheese from going bad. Now, at the time, people knew why cheese went bad. It wasn't, rocket science. It was just from bacteria. And we also, back then, they knew how to solve it, right? You just heat it up. But it turns out that if you heat up cheddar cheese before you kill all the bacteria, it turns into a gooey mess. The fats and the solids separate, and it turns into sort of like an orange oatmeal. And Kraft realized that was what he needed to figure out. He needed to figure out how to pasteurize cheddar cheese without it turning into that orange oatmeal. That was the key problem that he needed to work on. And so after he was finished delivering cheese, Kraft would come home, and he'd go into his kitchen, he'd take out a block of cheddar cheese, put it on the counter, and he'd chop it up. He'd take a pan, he'd put it on the stove, turn on the heat, and he'd sprinkle that cheese into the pot, and he'd start stirring. He was trying to figure out a way where he could just heat up the cheese just right, and it wouldn't turn into that orangey oatmeal. And he was stirring one night, kind of daydreaming, thinking, maybe if I put it in an ice bath right after I heated it up, or I know, I'll add powder to it, and that'll keep the fats and the solids together. And he realized he had stirred just a little bit too long. He wanted to see what was left of that cheese, and when he looked in the pot, to his surprise, it was a rich, creamy cheese product. Kraft had invented the first preserved cheese. In 1916, he was issued a patent for the preservation of cheddar cheese through excessive agitation. All he had to do was stir it an extra long time. It was great. People loved it. It was the only cheese you could buy in the summer that wouldn't go bad. The U.S. military bought tons of it. They sold it in these little 8-ounce tins. Now, I know what you're probably thinking. Tin cheese? Come on. That's not innovation. What kind of impact does that have? Kraft macaroni and cheese, we still eat that today. We don't eat tin cheese. Well, I bet most of you here have eaten or still eat Kraft tin cheese. You just don't recognize it. It wasn't until 1965 that Kraft had invented a machine that would slice that canned cheese and put single cellophane wrappers around it to make what today we call American cheese, which has become so popular that we don't even trace it back to Kraft. How was it that Kraft was able to create this disruptive product, this disruptive innovation that totally changed the cheese market forever? Well, remember early on, Kraft realized that the key problem, what I call the Keystone problem, was figuring out how to make a preserved cheese. Kraft could have done a million things. He could have thought about buying more carts. He could have thought about selling different cheeses. But he realized that there was an opportunity to disrupt the market, and the key problem that needed to be solved was how to pasteurize cheese. What separates nascent ideas and opportunities from disruptive innovations, the chasm between them, is usually a keystone problem that links the two. Back in your companies, think about the problems you're working on. Think about the products you're working on. Are these products that are going to totally disrupt the market? Think about those problems you're working on right now, those new products, those new ideas. And ask, are these Keystone problems? Am I working on the right problems? Because remember, what separates innovators from non-innovators sometimes is just working on that different problem.